In this video, we'll be looking at the matrix rotation interview question in JavaScript. My name is Larry, and this is Digital Logic. To get started, you'll need to download the project from GitHub. A link is in the description below. I've also provided a link to an introduction video to the series, which will walk you through setting up your development environment. With that out of the way, let's get started. So I've already got the project open in IntelliJ. So open up the project browser, and then open the matrix rotation.js file. For this challenge, you need to write a function that will rotate an n by n matrix clockwise by 90 degrees. The matrix is guaranteed to be square. The following examples demonstrate the expected output for the provided input. Once you have a solution that you're ready to test, open up a terminal. In VS Code, the shortcut is Ctrl-tilde, and then type npm test matrix rotation, and then hit enter. The testing framework will test any function that you include in the module.exports, so you can provide multiple solutions, and the testing framework will test all of them. If you want to attempt to solve this challenge without a hint, then pause the video now. So I'll create a 4x4 matrix to serve as an example. A matrix is just a two-dimensional array, which in JavaScript is just an array of arrays. To access any one position within the grid requires two array accessors. The first one defines which row to access. This is the y-axis. The second one defines which column to access. This is the x-axis. This may be opposite to what you're used to, but in a two-dimensional array, the y-axis is specified first, followed by the x-axis. The simplest approach to solve this challenge would be to create a second grid, which I'll name result, and then copy the rows from the original grid into the columns of the result grid. Don't worry about trying to rotate the grid in place just yet. Once we go over the basic solution, then I'll give you some hints on how to solve the extra credit assignment. So go ahead and pause the video now and try to come up with a solution to this challenge. When you're ready to continue, come back here and we'll walk through the solution. Welcome back. So I'll start by renaming this method to copy rotate, and then update the export. And then I'll create a new constant, max equals grid.length. And then create another constant, result equals, and I need result to be a two-dimensional array. There's a lot of different ways to initialize an array in JavaScript. For this challenge, I'm going to use the array.from method, which will create a new array from an array-like object. For the first parameter, pass in a new object with a length property set to max. The second parameter allows us to define a mapping function, and for this I'll just pass in a new function that returns an empty array. And then add a return result statement. And now we just need to copy the rows from the grid into the columns of the result array. So I'll create a new for loop, let y1 equals 0 and x2 equals max minus 1. Set the execution condition to while y1 is less than max, and then increment y1 and decrement x2. And then create another for loop, let I equal 0, I is less than max, and then increment I. Now set result at I and x2 equals grid at y1 and I. That should do it. Save the file, and then open up the console to check the test results. And it's passing. This is a pretty simple solution. We just copy the contents of the original grid into a new result grid. So the question is, can we rotate the matrix in place? If you want to attempt this challenge without any hints, then pause the video now. So let's go back to our example matrix. We can't just copy a row into a column because we'd be overwriting data. What we have to do is pull some data out of the matrix to create some room so that we can move everything around within it. So I'll start by splitting up the matrix into levels. With our 4x4 matrix, we'll have two levels, the outer ring and the inner ring. For now, let's focus on the outer ring and split it up into 4 even sections. So what we need to do here is copy the contents of one section into memory. You could copy a single value at a time or the whole section at once. This creates space in the matrix to move the next section into its position. Continue this process all the way around the loop. Then it's just a matter of adapting this logic to rotate the inner loop. And finally, this is a very challenging problem, so don't beat yourself up if you can't solve it. Good luck, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back. So I will be going over 2 different solutions to this challenge. The first one is more difficult to code, but easier to understand. So I'll start out by creating a new function, and I'll name it InPlace Buffer. And then I'll add this function to the export list, and then create 4 variables, top, left, right, and bottom. We could substitute all 4 of these variables for a single level variable, but I think the code is easier to understand with the 4 separate variables. So I'll leave that refactoring up to you. Now we need to define a loop to iterate through each layer within the grid. So I'll create a new while loop, and the execution condition will be while top is less than bottom. And then I'll go ahead and add the return grid statement at the end of the function. And now increment the top and left counter, and then decrement the right and bottom counter. So the first step is to copy the top row into memory. So I'll create a new constant, catch equals grid at top dot slice, and then pass in the left and right variables as the first 2 parameters. Now we need to copy the left column into the top row. So create a for loop, let x equal left and y equal bottom. Set the execution condition to while x is less than right, and then increment x and decrement y. Now grid at top and x equals grid at y and left. Now we need to copy the bottom row into the left column. So create another for loop, let x equal right and y equal bottom. Set the execution condition to while x is greater than left, and then decrement x and decrement y. And now the assignment will be grid at y and left equals grid at bottom and x. And now we need to copy the right column into the bottom row. Create another for loop, let x equal right and y equal top. Set the execution condition to while x is greater than left, and then decrement x and increment y. And now grid at bottom and x equals grid at y and right. And finally, we need to copy the catch into the right column. So create another for loop, let y equal top and I equals 0. Set the execution condition to while y is less than bottom, and then increment y and increment I. And now grid at y and right equals catch at I. And that should do it. Press Ctrl tilde to open up the console, and then check the test results. And it is passing the test. So this solution does work. It isn't overly complex, but it is pretty tedious, and it's really easy to make a mistake. For the next solution, we'll rotate the elements one at a time, and you'll see that it's actually going to be a lot easier to code. So I'll start out by creating a new function, and I'll name it InPlace 2. Create a new constant, width equals grid.length minus 1. So what I'm going to do is focus on rotating the four corners of the grid first. So we need to copy the value in the top left corner into memory. So create a new constant, temp equals grid at 0, 0. And now we need to copy the value in the bottom left corner into the top left corner. So grid at 0, 0 equals grid at width and 0. And now we need to copy the value in the bottom right corner into the bottom left position. So grid at width and 0 equals grid at width and width. And now the value in the top right corner needs to be copied into the bottom right position. So grid at width and width equals grid at 0 and width. And then finally, we need to copy the value in the temp variable to the top right position. So grid at 0 width equals temp. So I'm going to go ahead and add this function to the export list. And then add the return grid statement at the end of this function. Save the file, and then I'll open up the console to check the test results. Scroll down to the latest test results, and it can rotate a 2x2 matrix. Of course, none of the others are passing yet, but we'll fix that in a second. So now we're going to focus on rotating the entire outer loop. So add a new for loop above the temp variable. Let I equal 0, I is less than width, and then increment I. And then make sure to include all of the grid assignments within this for loop. We need to be able to shift what we select over by the value of I. Use the diagram on the right as a reference. The top left position will move on the x-axis, so change the 0 to an I. And then update the assignment on the next line. The bottom left position needs to be able to move up on the y-axis, so change this to width minus I, and then update the assignment on the next line. The bottom right position needs to be able to move to the left on the x-axis, so change this to width minus I, and now update the assignment. And then the top right position will move down on the y-axis, so change this 0 to I, and then update the assignment. Save the file, and then open up the console to check the test results. And it is now passing the 3x3 test. So now we need to update our code so it can work on the inner loop. So I'll create another for loop. Let L equal 0. L is less than grid.length divided by 2, and then increment L. Now update the inner loop, set I to equal L, and then update the execution condition to while I is less than with minus L. So now we just need to update our grid positions. For the top left corner on the inner loop, we'll want to move in the Y direction, So I'll change this 0 to L, and then update the assignment on the next line. For the bottom left corner on the inner loop, we'll want to move in the x-axis. So change this 0 to L, and then update the assignment on the next line. When we're in the bottom right corner, we'll want to move up on the y-axis. So change this to width minus L, and then update the assignment. And then finally, the top right corner will have to move in the x-axis. So change it to width minus L, and then update the assignment for that same position. And that should do it. Save the file, and then open up the console to check the test results, and it's passing the test. Well, that is it for this video. If you like this video, then please like, share, subscribe. If you want to support the creation of these videos, then check out my Patreon page. A link is in the description, and I'll see you in the next video.